Welcome to another episode of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we're going to be continuing our What If Naruto Was in High School DxD series as we get into Season 3, Love and Chaos. As always, I want to thank everyone who is a supporter of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Really means a lot that you guys have been supporting the channel lately. We're really growing, really on the move. We are halfway to the goal of 800 subscribers as we are on the road to 1K and beyond. Truly loving the reboot of this series so far, and the feedback that I'm getting truly amazing. As always, don't forget to check out the other series that we have on the channel. We had the earlier video out today of What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange. We also have Naruto Yokai, What If Sasuke Uchiha Was a Girl. And we have My Hero Academia Budokai, What If Deku Was Trained by Master Roshi. And stay tuned for tomorrow's morning video, as we're going to be continuing another series that you guys have really been interested in. And that is What If Deku Was a Power Ranger. So that series will be continuing tomorrow. We'll be getting into Season 3 of My Hero Academia with that series as well. And don't forget, you still got some voting to do, because I haven't given One for All to anyone just yet. So we've still got people in the running for that. I've seen some ideas thrown around for how to use One for All in this series, and I'm thinking that I might lean towards that area, but it'll be remain to be seen. But still, continue to vote for that and everything else. As always, thank you for all of your love and support with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow. You guys, really special, best fans. Thank you for everything. And as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show of What If Naruto Was in High School DxD, Season 3, Part 1, Love and Chaos. Naruto would be having a dream. As he looked over, he would see that he were in the middle of rubble. Everything around him was on fire. He would hear the screams of his fellow comrades and members of the House of Gremory. As he would look around, he would see the bodies of Kiba and Koneko on the ground. He would see Asuya lying dead at his feet. He would see the bodies of Zenovia and Akeno as well among the fire. He would see everyone that he knew and loved, all dead in front of him. As he would hear one more final scream, he would rush through everything, knowing that the scream were coming from none other than Rias. As he would make his way to a clearing, he would see an injured and beaten Rias Gremory on the ground. As she looked at him, her eyes being filled with a form of hope, as Naruto would rush towards her before she would be vaporized in pure light. As Naruto would look, wondering where the attack had come from, he would see hovering above him were none other than Rainier, taunting him for letting everyone die once again, as Naruto would yell like a wounded animal. He would quickly awaken from his nightmare in a room that he couldn't recognize as he looked around to see that he had new surroundings. He would find himself in a rather large bed, seeing that Rias and Asuya were by his side, both girls awakening to Naruto's scream, asking him if everything were alright. Naruto would just be happy to see that the two of them were alive as he pulled them into a hug. Both girls shocked, as Naruto were never the one to initiate bodily contact, but nevertheless they could tell that he had suffered from a nightmare, and so they would not argue, but instead hug him back as well, assuring him that everything were fine. However, as Naruto started to come to his senses, he would see that his room had definitely gotten a lot bigger, and so had the bed. Being told by Rias that while everyone were asleep the night before, she had her brother and father remodel the entire house, going from a one-story building to a multi-layer complex, looking almost as if it were a hotel. The next day, everyone would arrive to school as it were the final day before summer break. Naruto wasn't sure what he was going to do in the meantime, since he wasn't sure what devils did for summer vacation. He figured he'd take some time to train at least, since he hadn't really had a full-on training session in a while, mostly being kept busy with forming pacts and contracts, as well as doing other work with Azazel and other members in the House of Gremory. He thought that this summer would be a chance for him to get some training in, but also unwind a bit, and finally have some peace to himself. However, that would not be the case, as once school was over, everyone would gather in the Occult Research Club, where Rias would make it known that they were going to be traveling to the underworld, as it was a yearly tradition for her during summer vacation, and that she would be bringing everyone along. Naruto would wonder what the underworld were truly like, as he didn't have a chance to truly explore it the last time he were there, noting that his main goal was to simply fight with Riser Phoenix and get Rias out of there as fast as possible. The last time leaving via Griffin. However, this time they would be taking the more proper channels to get there, and that they would be taking the dimensional train owned by the Gremory family. Azazel would also be going as well, as it was still his job to help train and get them up to speed in using their sacred gears, and especially for Naruto, as he had special training in mind for him. With that, the members of the House of Gremory would pack their things, and they would be ready to go, as they would board the dimensional train and make their way to the Gremory domain of the underworld. While enjoying their trip, they would also be boarding with the House of Sea-Tree, Sona along with Tsubaki and Saji, as they too were traveling to the underworld, and they would thank Rias for the ride. Among everyone, Koneko would seem to be a bit off. She had a lot on her mind, but she wasn't sure of what to say. Gasper would worry about her, while he were still in his little box. However, Naruto would take the initiative to ask if she were doing fine. After all, the two of them hardly had time to hang out anymore, and they hadn't visited that new parfait joint that they wanted to try. Koneko being Naruto's #1 snack buddy when it came to going out and trying new foods. The two of them could go out and eat any time of day or night. Even at 2 a.m., they had no problem walking down to the street and going to McDonald's to have early morning McGrills. It was just something that they were fond to. However, Koneko would tell Naruto that everything were fine and that there were nothing to worry about, giving a reassuring but rather fake smile. Naruto would decide to leave it at that for now, but he would make an effort to try to talk to her again later. As they would continue to make their way through the underworld, soon dropping off Sona and her party, they would soon arrive over the domain of the Gremory fortune, seeing its vast lands and territory. Naruto seeing firsthand the true depths of the underworld, and noting that it looked rather beautiful, not the fire and brimstone that he was raised to believe. Although Azazel would remark that that was just another part of the underworld, and that not everything was like how a church says it was. As they were looking over the vast territory of the underworld, the train would stop hovering in the air. Rias, unsure of what were happening, would go to speak to the conductor to try to figure out what were going on, as she and Azazel would leave to check things out, leaving everyone else to their own devices. Suddenly, a large explosion would occur, and everyone would be sent flying out of the train. As they were hurtling towards the ground, Naruto would instantly create all of his shadow clones. Taking a flying Raijin kunai respectively, each clone would strike the kunai to the ground, grabbing someone who had been falling from the sky before teleporting to the kunai's location, thus saving everyone from impact. As they were now all grounded, they would see a rumbling coming from behind the mountainside, as they would look and see a large and purple dragon, clad in armor, had appeared. Akeno would take the lead since Rias were no longer around, and she would coordinate everyone to plan their assaults, sending both Zenovia and Kiba to cover the left and the right flank, while Koneko and Naruto would take the leading assault. Asuya and Gasper would stay at a distance while she would attack from long range. Everyone would hop into action following the plan, Naruto using his boosted gear and amplifying his power, as well as preparing a quick transfer if needed. While preparing himself for the boost transfer, Naruto would create shadow clones, 3, who would engage in combat with the dragon. Working alongside Koneko, they would engage in close-range combat, Naruto keeping the dragon on its toes, countering its fire with his wind style, as the 3 Narutos would launch a wind-style wind dragon jutsu. 3 wind dragons appearing as they would merge into one larger one, the wind dragon times 3, colliding with a large torrent of flame, the 2 canceling each other out long enough for Kiba and Zenovia to land in hits of their own, Kiba with the Holy Devil Sword, and Zenovia with Durandal. The 2 would get 2 hits in on the dragon, slashing him in his chest and sending him back. While Koneko would go in for an assault of her own, Naruto would send out the Gale Palm, pushing her forward as she sent a fist rocketing towards its face. As the original Naruto had hit the limit of his boosted gear, he would transfer all of the power to Akeno, who would summon a large torrent of her lightning, blasting away at the dragon. Despite all of their coordinated efforts, the dragon had not taken much damage, and was in fact still preparing for a fight. Naruto, realizing that he might have to go into that state, started to draw on the power of the nine-tailed fox, everyone sensing that Naruto was about to pick things up. He would enter into his 2 tails cloak, moving at blitzing speeds, heading straight towards the dragon, his fist ready to deliver a devastating blow, as the dragon was preparing to counter with his own. As the 2 would collide in a large explosion, pushing each other back, Naruto could feel that this dragon were definitely not a pushover, and that he might need even more just to stand a chance. However, before the fight could continue, Azazel and Rias would appear from hiding, telling everyone that that was enough and that the sparring session was over. Everyone would look to Azazel and ask what he meant by that. However, he would then reveal that the dragon they were fighting was actually named Tannen, and that he were actually a loyal servant to Sir Zex, being the former Dragon King, now turned devil. Tannen would introduce himself, stating that Naruto definitely had quite the punch when it came to his power, and that he was actually making him sweat a little as he felt he actually had to try. Rias would then apologize to everyone for having to deceive them, but this was a test to see how strong they had gotten. It seemed that everyone had improved a lot, and that their teamwork was top-notch. Azazel would even praise all of them for working quite well in unison, but especially for Naruto for his quick thinking. Whatever he lacked in terms of academics, he definitely made up for it in his battle strategy. Naruto would rub the back of his head and actually feel a bit flabbergasted at the praise that he were receiving, since he felt like he didn't really do all that much, Just fighting was something that came natural to him. With that, everyone would make their way over to the main household of the Gremory family, Naruto seeing where Rias' parents actually lived. As they would make their way inside, they would be greeted by Graphia, as well as a young boy who would come running up to Rias, hugging her and welcoming her back. Rias introducing him as her nephew, the son of Sir Zex. With that, they would make their way to the main dining hall, where Naruto would get to meet Rias' mother, who was very beautiful for a woman of her age. Definitely not hard to see where Rias got her good looks from. As she would welcome them all inside, she would be especially happy to greet Naruto, teasing her daughter for having a crush on him, causing Rias to blush a lot, as she would tell her mother not to embarrass her so, as they would make their way over to the dining hall, where they would be having that evening's dinner. Naruto would meet Rias' father again, and he would thank him for the remodeling that he had done to their home, knowing that his parents truly loved it, as well as the all-expenses-paid vacation around the world that he was able to give them. He would remark that he were only sad that he couldn't have done more, but Rias didn't want him to, remarking that the house was actually going to come with 50 newly ushered in maids, Rias being very quick to shut that down, as she was not going to tolerate any more competition. Of course, Naruto didn't keep his mind in the gutter, but even still, she didn't want to take that chance. They would talk with Naruto and ask about his upbringing and about how he learned to do the things that he could do. Naruto telling a brief summary of his backstory, they would be amazed and enamored with him and his abilities. They would have also heard that Naruto had proclaimed that he wanted to become the 5th Devil King of the underworld, something about adding the title of Hokage to among the 4 devils. They would congratulate him for having such an ambitious goal, remarking that a boy of such vigor would definitely be worthy of being a son-in-law, and that if they got to it, maybe they could see some grandkids. Of course, Rias would be very embarrassed by all of this, telling her parents to not speak of such things. And not just Rias, on the other hand, as the other females of the House of Gremory also were thinking along the same lines. Naruto being the only one not to fully get it, as the last thing on his mind was having babies at the moment. He still wasn't even a mid-ranking devil. He had a lot to go before he were ready to think about such things. Dinner would go fine and everyone would be given their own assigned rooms. Naruto enjoying the rather spacious area that he had been given, although kind of missing the small and quiet and even cramped area that he used to have. As he laid in bed, thinking about how everything in his life had changed. How just a year ago he were just a rather unordinary boy in an ordinary world. But that ever since becoming a devil, his life had changed in ways that he could never fully describe. He sometimes wondered if he would ever miss his old life, the boring, mundane, the life that he were going to live. Although he would quickly brush those feelings aside, as he knew he were not a normal human, and he knew for a fact that a normal life was something he could never have. As everyone else would go in for the night to go to sleep, Naruto, before drifting off, would awaken to 2 more people in his room. It would be both Zenobia and Asuya, who weren't really used to the big beds and big rooms and would feel safer being with Naruto. Of course, Naruto asked if he could just give them a clone, but they refused, stating that the clones never lasted too long anyway, and Zenobia felt that she could only be with the real thing, Asuya feeling the same way. Naruto would ask if Gaspar were doing alright, since he wasn't probably used to having a big and spacious area either, but he were doing perfectly fine, He was just staying inside of his box on top of the bed playing with the video game that Naruto had given him, and for the most part he was content. Meanwhile, Koneko were dealing with her own reservations as well. Rias checking in on her and seeing if she were alright. Koneko would admit that she had something that had been bothering her. She had noted that for a while now she felt her power stagnating. She wasn't really getting any stronger like the other members of the House of Gremory. Naruto on his own was nearly amazing, but Kiba had grown stronger. Zenovia, even Asya was improving, and she felt like she was still being stagnant. Rias would assure her that everything would come in due time. However, Koneko would start to shed tears, remarking that she knew that there were a power within her, but she were afraid to use it, as she didn't want to be like her. Rias would give her a hug and comfort her, wondering if there were anything that she could do. The next day, Azazel would gather everyone outside, remarking that for the next 3 weeks they were going to need to train and build up their strength, and that he had had special preparations made to help gauge everyone's abilities. For Asya, she was going to work on developing her twilight healing. For Akano, she was going to be training with a certain someone, and he would ask her to try to get along with her teacher, as a man with black wings would appear next to Azazel. Akano recognizing him as her father, Barkio. Kiba would be getting training from a top swordsman of the House of Gremory to help improve his skills with the new blade, the Holy Devil Sword. Naruto would be having some training of his own, as he would be going off with Tanin to work not only on getting a hold and a mastery of his balance breaker, but also to help try to quell some of that other power that was within him. Rias would be having some studying to do, as she needed to work on better utilizing her house's talent and ability, noting that to be a good leader, she had to be able to put her pieces in the best position to win. And then there would be Zenovia, who would work on trying to master usage of Durandal. While Koneko would be working on training and sparring with her own abilities, Naruto would make the petition to take Koneko with him, remarking that he felt that she would be better off training with him, as she was a powerhouse, and having a good sparring partner would work well for him, alongside with Tanin. Azazel would ask if Koneko wanted to do this, and Koneko would agree. This would buy her a few jealous eyes, but Rias would understand the need for this. Before leaving, she would ask Naruto to watch over Koneko, and to try his best to help her. Naruto would give her the thumbs up, and tell her that he was going to do his best. Then finally there came Gasper. His main problem was getting over his shyness. It wasn't too bad since he had had much help from Naruto, but still, Naruto wasn't always going to be around. So for Gasper, his training was learning to walk in a public crowd and not feel so shy. With that, everyone would go their separate ways, and their 3 weeks of training would begin. The start of Naruto and Koneko's training would be rather difficult. Tanin truly working like a taskmaster, as he would chase the two of them relentlessly, blowing away his mighty flames, causing the two of them to stay on their toes as they tried to avoid the attacks, building up their core strength, as well as trying to figure out how to bust out Naruto's balance breaker. As Naruto would meditate whenever he wasn't doing physical training, he would look within himself as he would try to speak with Dreg or with Kurama. Kurama, for all of this point in time, had seen the improvement within Naruto. However, he were more aware than anyone that there were some things that Naruto would simply have to overcome on his own. While Kurama couldn't say that he truly liked Naruto, he couldn't admit that he didn't despise him either. And with everything that had changed, with all the forces gathering around him, he knew that something were going to have to give. Although what it was, he couldn't entirely be sure. Naruto would try to speak to Kurama from time to time. Kurama would ignore him, yell at him, or belittle him for saying something incredibly stupid. The two would break down into an argument and Naruto would simply leave again. Kurama would tell Naruto that no matter how hard he tried, he could never conquer all of his own hatred. Naruto remarking that he at least wanted to have a chance to, noting that they couldn't afford to stay the way they were now. Something was going to have to change. If he couldn't find the balance within himself, he might never be able to perfect his balance breaker. Dreg would also agree with this. However, Kurama would yell that Dreg wasn't locked in a cage. Naruto would ask Kurama if being locked within this cage was what truly bothered him. And he would state that he didn't feel that it were right that only one of Naruto's hosts didn't have to stay locked away like this. However, Dreg would remark that he was indeed locked away, inside of Naruto's left hand, just as he were locked away in Naruto's lower abdomen, noting that he were still bonded to the sacred gear that he and Naruto were attached to, and that didn't change for anything. However, Kurama will only scoff at all of this, thinking that Dreg were only making excuses. And then even the dragon and the fox would be going at each other's throats. This would call for the situation to break down, and Naruto would simply call an end to the meeting from there, everyone leaving and going their own separate ways. At least mentally, because, well, physically, all three of them were still attached to one another. Koneko would notice the struggle going on within Naruto, and she would ask him more about what he were dealing with. Naruto would tell her about the struggle within himself, and Koneko would note that Naruto wasn't like most dragon emperors, that in the past most were selfish and greedy, and craved for nothing but absolute power, but that Naruto weren't like most others, as he fought to protect others, and he never fought for selfish gain. That was most likely the reason why performing the balance breaker was not as easy for him. He had a different motivation, a different reason. If he could find his reason, if he could find what made him want to have that power, then maybe he would find a new source to perform his balance breaker. However, Naruto would also ask what bothered Koneko, knowing full well that there was something that was holding her back also. With no one else around, Koneko would feel comfortable enough to tell Naruto what she had been dealing with. She would tell him of her own backstory, about how at a young age she had a sister who abandoned her after killing their former master, and how it brought her the ire of the devil community. How she had been saved by Sir Zex, and that it was only thanks to him that she were a member of Rias's household. She would tell of the power that she had within herself, her sage arts, but that she found it hard to use because she felt as though using them would make them like her sister. However, Naruto would give her a pep talk, telling her that everything were going to be fine, that she wasn't like her sister at all, and she wasn't alone. She had Rias, Asia, Akano, Zenobia, Kiba, and even him, that whatever she had to deal with, she should trust in her friends, and that no matter what, he was always going to be there for her, and he wasn't going to let anyone take her away. With that, Koneko would feel immensely happy, feeling as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, as she pulled Naruto into a hug. Her physical features would start to change. The next thing he knew, Koneko grew cat ears, and then a tail. He could feel the power flowing from within her. This must have been her sage arts, Naruto would think. Koneko remarking that she now felt that the shackles that binded her were slowly starting to melt away, and she felt as if she could finally use the power that she had within. This was when Naruto would ask her for a favor. He would ask her if she could teach him a way to use sage arts. Koneko would be shocked to think that Naruto would want to ask her for help with this, but Naruto would explain that using sage mode was something that his parents could never teach him, simply because the sage mode that he had to learn, the one that his father couldn't pass down to him, came from a place that no longer existed. He would tell her of how his father could use toad sage arts, but that he had no summoning animals or toads that he could use in the meantime. However, he did have one thing that could work. She would ask Naruto to summon his familiar, and Naruto would do so, as the tiny female nine-tailed fox yokai that he had named Kushina would appear before him. Koneko would then go up to the tiny nine-tails, petting it as she would speak to it telepathically via her sage arts, instructing the little nine-tails on what to do. She would say that she was going to teach Naruto a certain way to use sage mode, and that they were going to use his familiar as the conduit, noting that for Naruto, in order for him to be able to draw upon nature energy, he had to get a feel for it. He had to get a link to understand it. If he knew what he was looking for, then he could draw upon it and use it to its fullest capabilities. Naruto would wonder if this would work or not, but Koneko would tell him to trust her. With that, she would get to work with tiny Kushina, teaching the little fox yokai how to draw in sage arts, much like she did with her own familiar, her tiny cat, Selena. It would take a little bit of time and effort, but soon Naruto's little yokai was able to draw in nature energy. Now, the only thing she needed to do was transfer it to Naruto. Naruto would wonder if maybe he could draw upon it if the two of them could form a link. With that, Naruto would perform the Uzumaki Chakra Chain Jutsu, as a small tiny chain would emit itself from Naruto's hand. It would then connect to the tiny yokai's spirit, forming a link between them. With that, tiny Kushina would slowly transfer her sage arts to Naruto, Naruto feeling the senjutsu flowing within him. He could feel the nature energy that were all around him. He now had a sense for it. He knew how to feel it and how to draw it out. As Naruto would allow it all to flow within his body, the pigment around his eyes would slowly begin to change, as an orange hue would form around them, the irises of his eyes changing from that of blue to that of an orange with an oval shape. As Naruto's eyes were now completely open, he could now feel that he were in a sage mode of sorts. As Koneko could sense the senjutsu within him, Naruto would be ecstatic. He would want to test it out and see what he could do, and Tanin would be just the opponent for him to do so. As he and the dragon would begin to spar, Naruto could feel that his body felt a lot more invulnerable. He felt as though he could take a lot more damage In fact, while in Sage mode, he had been knocked off a cliffside and fell almost 100 feet to the ground. However, when he crashed, he barely felt a thing. He wondered if this were the true extent of Sage mode and its abilities. As the two continued their training, Koneko assisting Naruto until he got to a point where he didn't need his familiar to draw the senjutsu for him, but rather he could do so himself, although it would still be difficult as he had to be completely still while he did so. This was where the shadow clones would come in handy. He would have two clones draw in the nature energy, and once they were finished, they would unsummon themselves, returning themselves back to Naruto, thus giving him a supply of Sage Arts, which lasted around 8 minutes per clone. And since he could only make a limited number of clones anyway, he would decide that if he needed Sage mode, he would only use 2 clones to gather Sage energy, which would give him around 16 minutes worth of Sage Arts. With that, Naruto and Koneko would then reach new heights in their training. Koneko now getting a hold and a mastery over her own Sage mode, along with Naruto practicing his new Sage mode and seeing what it could do. Working alongside Tannen, the two members of the House of Gremory would train and get stronger. Naruto feeling that he could do much more than he used to. He would want to see if he could evolve his jutsu any further, wondering what Sage Arts could do for his ninjutsu. He would take the final few weeks to practice on his own, trying to develop a new technique, deciding that he would use this time to enhance the signature technique he had been given by his father. One day while they were practicing with it, a large boulder would be falling, and Naruto would attempt to smash it away, as he used his newly found ninjutsu, gathering the chakra into the palm of his hand. Before he could deliver the strike to the large rock, a tall figure would appear out of nowhere, destroying it in a single punch. Naruto turning, he would see a tall young man, muscular in size and in a tracksuit. With short dark hair, he would walk up to Naruto, stating that he didn't know what he were up to, but he didn't want to leave Naruto taking something so heinous to chance. Naruto remarking that he was going to try to blow that thing away. However, this unknown figure had gotten involved. The man would apologize for interrupting Naruto's training, introducing himself as Saiyorg, and that he were happy to see that someone were actually training and working so hard, knowing that he had heard about Naruto and of his plans to become the 5th Devil King. Naruto wondering how he could know such a thing. Saiyorg would simply leave Naruto off, telling him that he had a fine goal and that he looked forward to potentially sparring with someone of his caliber someday, leaving Naruto alone to continue his training. Soon the training period would be over, and everyone would gather together once again. Rias could see that everyone in the House of Gremory had truly worked hard, but that among the most of them, she could see that Koneko had finally had some amazing growth, as she could see that Koneko were letting her tail and her ears out now. She would walk over and hug her, telling her that she was very proud of what she had accomplished. Not just her, she would thank Naruto as well for all that he had done for her. Naruto remarking that Koneko had done just as much for him as well, and that he felt he had truly gotten stronger. Although he would tell Azazel that he didn't make too much headway in terms of certain areas, such as getting his balance breaker and harnessing the Nine-Tailed Fox's power. He would say that he had gained one thing though, telling Azazel of how he had achieved his own form of Sage mode. Azazel would be pleased at this, knowing that Naruto had made progress, and that they should all be proud. With that, Everyone would get dressed as there were going to be a banquet to be held, as the leaders of the other deity classes would be arriving, as a special treaty were going to be signed. Naruto asking who these other deities were, Kiba would explain that there were more than just the basic mythologies, things like the standard Christianity that they were a part of, with the angels, the fallen angels, and the devils. But there was Egyptian mythology, Persian mythology, Native American mythology, and even Norse mythology. Naruto being taken aback by this to actually learn that people like Odin and Loki and Thor were actually real, that they weren't just fiction or a form of movie entertainment, but that they were actually alive. Kiba would remark that the movies tend to get a lot of things mixed up. Although, for in fact, Thor, Loki, Odin, they were in fact real. Thor's hammer, that was real too. Asgard was definitely real. So was Heimdall and the Rainbow Bridge. And that if he ever got the chance, he should go visit, especially during October. That's when the partying really starts. As everyone would get ready for the banquet, Rias would remark that they were going to be on security duty and to make sure that they stay alert at all times. As the party would get underway and all of the guests would slowly arrive, even Michael would be making an appearance, along with Irina, who would be happy to see her friends doing so well. Azazel, who would be representing the fallen angels, as well as Sir Zex, who would be representing the devils, along with his other cohort in Devil King, Seraphal Leviathan. Soon, Odin would make his appearance himself, along with his assistant, an older woman in a business suit with long white hair, introducing herself as the Valkyrie of Odin, Rosvisa. Odin would be pleased to see that everyone had arrived, apologizing for being late and taunting Rosvisa a little. Rosvisa would be less than pleased with her rather old and vulgar boss. However, he would quickly shut her down when he mentioned that her stuck-up attitude was the reason why she couldn't get a man now, causing her to sit in the corner and cry, remarking that she were trying her best, but it seemed as though no one could appreciate a Valkyrie of her standing. As the party were getting underway and Naruto and the others were making sure that security and everything else were fine, he would run into Ravel Phoenix, who were also attending as well. Surprised that she wasn't with her brother, Riser, she would explain that she were a bishop in her mother's household, and that she was a free-roaming bishop and could go and do what she wanted. She would apologize for how the party had gone and the way she had acted, and would give Naruto a special gift. It would be a black box. Naruto, not sure what was inside, would thank her anyway and put it inside of his coat pocket. She would also offer Naruto a chance to try some of her tea and cookies whenever he had the chance, and Naruto would agree as he never wanted to turn down a chance to try some new food. As the party were going underway, Naruto would run into Saiyorg once again, he and the others as Saiyorg was breaking up a fight amongst a few of the guests. Rias introducing Saiyorg as her cousin, and Naruto being shocked that the two were related. However, as they were making their way through the buildings, Koneko would sense something, a presence that she had not felt in a long time. Without hesitation, Koneko would begin to run towards the exit, running out into the forest. Naruto, seeing what were going on, would give chase after her, and Rias would do the same, knowing that she were worried for Koneko as well, and thinking that if she were running out in such a hurry, then it could only mean one thing. As Naruto and Rias would give chase to Koneko, who would be searching for the signature where that energy were coming from, that distinct form of chi, she would soon arrive at her location, as an older woman with long dark hair, dressed in a black silk yukata, along with her own feline features, will look down upon her, welcoming her little sister, knowing that it had been a while since they had time to speak, and Koneko coming face to face with the woman who had caused her so much harm, her older sister, Kuroka. Meanwhile, as the treaty were about to be signed, along with Odin and Michael and the devils and the fallen angels, before it could be complete, a new guest would interfere into the fray, as a man with long, slick white hair would hover above them all, knowing that this would not do, and Azazel, now seeing that whoever was going to crash the party had finally made their presence known. The god of mischief, Loki. This concludes What If Naruto Was in High School DxD, Season 3, Part 1, Love and Chaos. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's morning video of What If Deku Was a Power Ranger and tomorrow's afternoon continuation of What If Naruto Was in High School DxD Season 3, Love and Chaos, Part 2. But with that, we're going to wrap up today's video. I'm Javon Harrington of Power Core Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.